Okay, I'm gonna probably ask you to indulge me just a little bit on these first few slides, a little bit outside of maybe what I would normally talk about, but hopefully I'll be able to get across to you why I think it's really important and related to what I do in making agronomic recommendations for you. So I've always been blessed, every company that I've worked for, to work for companies that are really grower focused. So I started in 1993 in the ag business, worked with growers that entire time, and every company that I've worked with, I can honestly say is really, truly focused at what is the best for their customers. Probably one time in there for a year, I worked for a company that was not, and I didn't work for them very long, okay? Cornelius is particularly conscientious about that. A lot of the decisions that we make behind the scenes, may not be the most profitable for Cornelius, but they know it is the best thing for you guys. And that's the reason we make those decisions, because that's how we choose to do business. And we know for us to be successful, you have to be successful, and we have to be very genuine with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the climate debate starting out here. You guys probably have seen this, some of these models here. This shows, they call this the hockey stick model. And when we talk about, global warming, or as I mentioned, the debate on climate, because is science ever settled? No. We got a lot of heads shaking those. If science is settled, it's not science, right? It's somebody's political agenda, basically. So when we talk about the debate of climate change, this is recorded temperatures. So when we first started being able to record temperatures, we were really cool from 1880, and then we started getting warmer on recorded temperatures. So they say, well, that's the Industrial Revolution. Man is causing this. This takes us back to the 1400s here, okay? So we have to have science involved in this, and we're taking ice cores, beryllium, there's different scientific methods that they use to get cores in the icebergs in the Arctic, on the ocean floor, and things like that. So we have to have some faith that this is accurate. The yellow one, this was an earlier version, and this version has that hockey stick model in there. Okay, so as they updated the science of this, and we don't know if it's accurate or not, we believe it is. We have to have some trust that it is, but we continue to study it is the point, and we continue to debate it, and it's never settled. But some of these models, when they took out some of what they thought were errors in this, would show that the temperatures there in the 14 to 1500s were quite a little bit warmer than it is today. So we're not living in the hottest period in history. We're living in the hottest period in what we know of history, which is always really just a short window, right? And we think we just know everything, and we think everything's happened in our lifetime, but it hasn't. So the other thing that will happen a lot of times, I thought this was really interesting. So this is in Australia, and this is a model from the 5 capital cities in Australia, and it shows that the temperature is rising, right? Not really surprising. You pack everybody into a city, you have a lot of industry in there, a lot of people there, and your temperatures are going to be different than they are out in the countryside. So this is the rural model. So temperatures out in the countryside in Australia, there's fluctuation like there always is. It really hasn't changed much. So just looking at things differently makes a lot of difference in how you're seeing things. This I thought was quite interesting. When they take these long-term, and we're looking here, 45,000, 450,000 years ago. So we're looking at long terms, again, from these ice cores, from cores they take at the bottom of the ocean, and what they think has happened over time. And as temperatures have started to rise during real cold periods, the carbon dioxide follows actually the rise in temperature, okay? Carbon dioxide is in pretty much everything. I mean, we're a carbon-based model. The Earth is carbon-based. We're carbon-based. There's carbon in everything. Carbon dioxide is in water. It's in the ground, okay? We think because we take out, quote, fossil fuels and burn it, that we're adding to the carbon dioxide and we're causing things to rise. It's a natural, carbon dioxide is just a natural occurrence in the earth that helps keep that temperature warmer, okay? Do we want the temperatures to be cold? You know, carbon dioxide is considered a greenhouse gas. Last time I checked, greenhouses grow things really well, right? But we don't want it to get too cold, just like we don't want it to get too warm. But are we really affecting that? So as temperatures have warmed, carbon dioxide follows it, and eventually carbon dioxide, you know, keeps things warm. That's a good chance that that's by design. You know, there's a good chance there's a designer that has designed all this to work like it does. Good chance it probably didn't happen by accident. Okay? So this is the big determiner of our temperatures. It's the sun, right? If the sun goes bye-bye, we go bye-bye the next day, or however long it takes to get the actual energy from the sun to earth, okay? This is what controls our temperatures. We do know that the sun has cycles, and this one here, every 11 years, there's cycles in the sun, in the activity of the sun. They're measuring this in sunspots, but it's just cycles that have always occurred. You're also seeing here this 88-year Gleisberg cycle. If this cycle continues to hold up with what we think it's done in past history, then we're due for a really, really serious drought, either 23, which we know, well, either 23, 24, or 25, okay? So we're in an El Nino pattern right now. It's probably not going to be 24. It could be 25 if this pattern holds up to be true over time. I'm hoping it was 2023. Because if you guys remember, when we broke that drought towards the end of June, we were really, really, really close to some really, really bad yields. We had a really serious drought going on, and we broke it just at the right time. Okay, so I'm hoping that was our Gleisberg cycle. If not, 2025 is what we look at for that potentially going to happen. Okay, this is just another example of other cycles. These things have always happened on Earth. It gets warmer and it gets colder, and they're usually a result of the sun. All right. So we talk about our, you know, what we have done as man to cause these things. And I grew up in the 70s. Okay. I mean, I remember Elvis dying, you know, but smog is something that we saw on the news every evening. Anybody else remember that in the 70s? That's all the news could report, is what the smog was like in Los Angeles. That's not a good thing. That's a man-caused thing that's not good. Would we want that to happen forever? Did we do anything about it? We'd still be seeing these if this occurred a lot in the US, wouldn't we? We'd be seeing it all the time on the news. So this slide shows, and particularly, you know, this is the big one here, is carbon monoxide, you know, from running cars and trucks and not having them clean burning like we have today. And look what we've done with those levels, okay? So we recognize something that's not good to the environment, and we, you know, nobody wants to live in that. We have done our part already in bringing down this, you know, the effects of what man is doing in the environment. This is an interesting one from your agronomic perspective. The green line is sulfur dioxide. Where did that used to come from when it was at higher levels? Coal burning plants. Yep. Evil acid rain from coal burning plants. So we develop scrubbers, we scrub the smokestacks, and we don't put sulfur dioxide into the air like we used to. Now we have to apply it to our crops because that was feeding our crops, right? You know, it was free and we always had it. Sulfur is going to leach down in the soil, so it doesn't remain there. We need to add sulfur every year. So my argument here is we've already done the common sense things that we need to do to keep the environment clean. Okay? Why should we care about that? I mean, we just go on happy and doing our farming and nobody's going to ever bother us, right? Not going to be any regulations. Nobody's going to tell us what to do. Okay? Did anybody see this one during the last World Economic Forum? Yeah. So this is not just some radical out there. This is the World Economic Forum. I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but it's out there. Okay? This lady thinks that farmers should be prosecuted for ecocide, just like war criminals. And she spells out farmers, fishermen, and energy production. That's her big evils in the world. Did you ever think that you would be considered evil and part of the problem in the world as a farmer? Farmers have been pretty well respected, haven't they? Okay. Now, I tell you these things because I see a future, if we don't start standing up and speaking and pushing it back against some of this stuff, where I'm not going to have the tools that I need to recommend to you to manage your operation like it needs to be managed, to produce the bushels you're going to produce and to be profitable. Okay? That's where it fits into the agronomy part of things. Okay, I'm going to flip this a little bit into agriculture, and I promise you we will get to the hard agronomy slides here before too long. I'm going to whiz through these pretty quick, but this is what I grew up with, was conservation agriculture. Does anybody remember this? Because we're not calling it this anymore, right? Anybody remember it? Kind of was coined in the 90s. And conservation agriculture is a great thing. Show of hands of anybody who took their farm over from a previous generation in their family. Anybody been passed down? Is anybody going to pass it down to their kids? Drew right there is going to take over our family farming operation. Okay? We have an investment in our land. We are always going to take care of it way better than anybody who doesn't have the slightest idea what we're doing out here. All right? We naturally are going to conserve our land. I don't know what the problem was with conservative or conservation ag, but I do want you to focus on, these are the tenets, you know. These are what they say that conservation ag was started. Now, kind of came out of the Dust Bowl, when we had the Dust Bowl and they created Soil Conservation Act, 1935. And these are some of the things that came out of that and eventually moved into the conservation ag as an umbrella. Okay, there's some awesome things here. You know, terraces, contour farming, leaving the residue on the top of the ground. Okay, awesome stuff, common sense. Things we all grasped onto, or grandparents grasped onto, and naturally use in our operation because we care about the land. So here's where we've moved to. And I thought for a while, younger people were just bored, so they needed new terminology, or they wanted to make it their own, or whatever, because we got into sustainable farming, still wanting to do the same things, but we need a new word. Regenerative agriculture next. You know, I just get used to that one, and then we got a new one. Okay, so my head's spinning here, and I'm like, I like conservation. Okay, why do we need these? Same things. Okay, we're trying to do the same things. We're starting to talk about holistic approaches and things that make my head explode. Okay, but now we're moving into this. So I'm beginning to think, now I see why they were changing the term, changing the terminology. They had an idea in mind. Now, this is my conspiracy theory telling me this, but I'm getting back to why does this mean something to us? Because they want to do kind of the same things, say things really good, but now we've got recommendations. And when I read these recommendations here, I see government control and tons of money being spent, billions of dollars being spent. Are you going to receive that money? Where's that money going to go? You ain't going to see it. You're going to see pennies. They're going to be telling you they're doing these things for the farmer, and there's going to be fat cats in the middle that are making billions off of this. Okay? This is why we need to stand up, I believe. So, how about organic farming? Where does it fit into this? We got some great organic farming going on in this country. Some of the most greatest inventions. You know, it's unbelievable the yield we're pulling in without using chemicals and fertilizer. Okay, we work with some great organic farmers. Where are they going to fit into this? Are these people going to like organic farming? They don't use the evil chemicals, right? They don't use chemicals, but they use intense tillage. Okay? So the same people that don't like chemicals, don't like conventional fertilizers, they do not like tillage either. Okay? So we're going to be all in this together. Okay, so as I'm talking about this, has anybody ever heard of the Irish potato famine? Okay? What happened there? A bunch of people starved, right? You got Irish heritage. A bunch of your relatives probably starved to death, 1 million of them. Okay? It's caused by Phytophthora infestans. Okay, does that sound familiar? It's a mold. It's not actually a fungus, but it's a mold. But we've heard about Phytophthora. We have seed treatments to protect against Phytophthora. So they lost half of their potato crop in 1 year. And over the next 7 years, they lost 3/4 of it. 1 million people died, 1 million people left the country as refugees looking for food. All right? We had no control methods for that. A simple mold that today we would control caused that kind of starvation and death. So even with organic farming, which I have come to really respect, we have to have these tools in our arsenal. I have to be able to recommend these things to you guys so we don't do something like that. Today, mefenoxam, metalaxyl, copper-based fungicides would all control that mold. Okay? And we've got mefenoxam is in our package of corn seed treatments. Metalaxyl is in a whole bunch of other ones, different companies. Okay, really common products. So pesticide use in general, I think it needs to be robust research and science-based. Right? It's supposed to be that way, right? That's what it needs to be. So when it comes to market, we know that it's safe. And I mean really know that it's safe. We need to keep doing studies as we use it. But these lawsuits, these court cases that are pulling our pesticides that have already been tested off the market are not a good thing for us. All right? We expect to have those tools. We may have already planned on using those tools. And then they get yanked off the market. If they're safe when they're registered, that should be the end of it. And the process doesn't need to be as costly as it is. Okay? It needs to be ran through universities, get the corporate influence out of it. And it doesn't need to be that costly. And then when the patents start, they should start upon registration. Okay? They shouldn't start, after 8 years of research and they only have 12 years left in the patent. These companies need to be incentivized to be able to bring those products to the market and spend that kind of money. All right? We need to speak out about this. Okay? So that we have the tools that we need to be successful. Common sense shouldn't be that difficult, should it? Okay, and why should we care about this subject? And then I promise you we'll get on to hard agronomics. You guys seen what's going on in Europe? Our brothers and sisters over there? Started in where? Started a year or two ago. Big protest. Netherlands. What were they protesting there? Got to prevent them from using nitrogen. Okay, nitrogen's evil. We're going to say you can't use it. Okay, and then it's warped into all over the EU, and they're trying to pass laws, just yanking pesticides off the market, whichever ones they think are evil. Okay, so our brothers and sisters are fighting this over there. It will come here if this continues. All right, we sit over here and we think we're insulated from it. We're not. We've already got things going on, you know, lawsuits, as I mentioned, pulling the products that are already approved off the market. So does this do any good, you think? Or give these farmers something to do in the off season? It has done good, okay? They have scrapped pesticide proposals already because of these protests, just pretty recently, right? Okay, moving into regular agronomy. What did we learn from 2023? All right. So many of you may have seen this map I put up here in June at the summer summit meeting, and we were pretty darn dry, right? We were at the end of that 6-week drought that everybody in the Corn Belt pretty much shared with, right? We got off to a pretty decent start, crop got up pretty decent, but man, we were dry. We talked about needing the rain immediately. We were at the breaking point, but subsoil moisture is pretty good. We like being able to root down early on. That can be very beneficial for corn. And then there at the kickoff time frame, this is what that map looked like. So when we put both of them together, you can see we made great gains. All right, we went from this, most of our area pretty good. We still had in Northeast Iowa, we still had some pretty tough areas. And we had some pretty tough yields come out of those areas. We still have to have water to raise a crop, right? Yes, our hybrids are tougher. Yes, they handle stress better. We have to have water to raise a crop. And, you know, we didn't get an excess of water, but we got really timely rains, and we had to have pretty darn good subsoil moisture to get us to that point, all right? So this is what the map looked like February 5th. You know, we talked at the kickoff, we got to have some moisture start building up that subsoil back again. I didn't think we'd get this much this quick. We had really, you know, we really started getting rains in some areas around Christmas, kind of kept feeding it, and we got that big system come through in mid-January. So we look back here at, this is the subsoil moisture that we talked about at post-harvest meetings, all right? We realized we're in some pretty dire straits, really. You know, we got fed in most areas. We got fed into having a decent crop, some cases a great crop, but we took all the moisture out of the soil to do that, okay? So we knew that we needed to replenish those soils. So with that rain in January, I mean, I normally expect the replenishment to probably happen late February in through March. But we have come a long ways here, okay, on the soil moisture. And if I put those two together, you know, Iowa's pretty red. Illinois is getting to be in pretty fine shape, okay? So I know, Brian, that's somebody up in your area is living good, because we know it's not you probably. But Illinois is looking decent, and Iowa's way, way better than it was, okay? So we're getting there. Now, we still need to go a little ways yet before we get to planting season, but we're within range now, okay? We need to get that subsoil moisture built back up. So this is the next thing that we'll look at on the weather. And these are predictions, so we never know what will happen, but we've been in an El Nino in the red. And sometime in that, the predictions are in that June, July, August timeframe. So midsummer, you know, maybe right after tasseling, we're probably going to flip and get into La Nina. And La Nina is what gives us our dry weather, right? Now, if that sets in and is really a really long and intense one, that's where we could see that iceberg cycle into 2025. This would be where it would set up. Okay, hopefully not. Hopefully we had it last year again. But that's what we're looking at. So, you know, as we think about getting things planted, getting them out of the ground early, you know, getting set up, maybe using the fungicide right after tasseling time frame, if we've got heat and drought stress looking at us, you know, might be a really good thing to do. So question, how much of the earth, how much of the oceans in the earth has been explored? Got any ocean nuts here? Just give me a guess. 50%? What do you think? 40, 20? 1, okay. It's about 5%, they think. So that's a pretty good guess. That's a shocking number. Isn't that amazing? You know, it'd be exciting to find some things that are down there. Maybe we've got some giant sharks or something still there. But the same could be said about the soil in the earth too, right? Okay, we're up here above, we look at the above ground symptoms all the time. There's a lot of stuff going on down underneath in the soil. It's similar to the oceans. There's a lot of stuff out there we don't know about. And remarkably, it says about a quarter of the world's biodiversity resides in the soil. And a lot of things we can't see, microscopic, fungi, the nematodes, things like that. I mean, we just don't know a lot about what all is down there in the soil, but we know it affects our crops. So I'm going to talk a little bit about biostimulants. I've really resisted doing this because it's confusing. It's confusing to me. There's a lot of things out there in this market. But basically, anything that helps the natural processes of plants in the soil is going to be a biostimulant. And things like living things like nitrogen fixing bacteria. So proven 40. Okay, there's an example of a nitrogen fixing biostimulant. Mycorrhizal fungi, things helping us get phosphorus in the solubility in the soil. Could be these formerly living things like seaweed extracts, humic, fulvic acid, things like that. Okay, it's a big, interesting, but again, confusing thing. And why is it confusing? This is my opinion. Okay, but there's tons of choices out there. There's a lot of companies. There's startup companies from California that immediately turns me off, but I know I have to pay attention and see if there's something good in it. Everything increases yields by a couple bushel, right? Everything that you look at, yep, increases yield by 2 to 3 bushel, 2 to 5 bushel. It's a lot of the products are live products, so they really need to be handled carefully. If you don't handle them carefully, you've wasted your time studying and your money. Okay, you've got to keep them alive. You can't mix them with the wrong things. It's like that with the proven 40. A bad experience. We go in our first experience with a biological, it doesn't pay off. We may never try it again. Figuring out what input is responsible. We got a lot of things going on out there. Is it the biostimulant or is it something else? Cost, unintended consequences. We're adding things to the soil. We don't know if they should be added to the soil. Okay. Same thing could be said for herbicides and things like that, but we just don't really know. So before I dive into a couple of products that I'm looking at, I wanted to remind you here of the 7 wonders of the corn world. Okay, so the big building blocks, Fred Below from University of Illinois, he does really great work. Puts these things together and shows additive effects and what's responsible for my yield. So as I think about this, when I've worked with customers through the years and they're wanting to work with some of these things that I kind of call tweaking around the edges, around the margins. So we're looking at adding, 2 to 5 bushel in there. We have to make sure we have all of our building blocks in place before we do that. It's so important. And then we can start working with some of these things. So we've got to get our pH right first. If the pH is not right, we're not going to utilize the nutrients that are in the soil, let alone things we add to it. All right. Nitrogen, of course, in corn is number 1, but P and K, the other macronutrients. Make sure our soil prep is what it needs to be. Hybrid variety selection is so important. You see in his, in Fred Below's work up here, the correct hybrid on the correct acre is so important. And we look at that as one of our main jobs for you guys. But micronutrients are next. Timely planting, we'll visit this a little more in depth. Minimize weed competition is still way more important than tweaking around the edges. Seed treatments are becoming more and more important. Foliar fungicides. When he talks about growth regulators here, he's really talking about foliar fungicides that he's working with. And he is getting some good results. So that leaves us with bios clear up here. So if you're going to start messing with bios and do some work on your farm with it, make sure you got these in place first, okay? It's so important. So a couple products, I'm pretty interested in the seaweed extracts, and I'm looking at products that are going to do something that I really know and believe are going to help our our production out there, going to increase our yield. So the interesting thing about seaweed extracts, they're stress relieving, okay? They help with the photosynthesis, nutrient uptake, but they also help with stress. And what have we talked about a lot of times with using a fungicide on corn and soybeans? What have you heard me say about them? Some of the things that I like about them and benefits. What do they do for the plant? Besides controlling fungus. Stress relievers, okay? The strobilurin portion of these fungicides we're using have stress relieving properties, okay? And so I think I've seen some good things out of the seaweed extracts. I'm going to work with this yield on. I did a little bit last year. I'm going to continue on with that just because my local FS that does my spraying carries it. And it's just a combination of these 3 different seaweeds, okay? And this is the test I did this year. So I'm splitting the whole field. Okay, I'm taking the next step from their small plot studies, and I'm splitting the whole field with it, and then I'm looking at it with field view to see if I have a yield increase. All right. So this year there was a 3 bushel yield increase, 16 acres versus 15.8 in this field. I had a 43 acre field. I usually carve out the end rows so I don't have any of those effects. And this is what I was looking at. So I did get a yield bump from this. You know, I'm spraying it at R3 stage, so that 1st of August time frame when I'm real stressful out there anyway. And there was probably a yield bump here, probably from reducing stress. Now last year, I did the same thing with Quilt XL, so a fungicide that has a strobe in it, and I got a 6 bushel yield increase in the same scenario. I'm not saying that that is better than the yield on. It's a different year. I may have got the same thing with the yield on, but I'm maybe doing some of the same things with these bios that I'm doing with my fungicide if I don't have a disease present and I don't need to control the disease. So the other one I'm looking at is ethylene inhibitors. So ethylene inhibition is what the strobies are doing. If the plant will produce ethylene gas when it gets real stressed, and then it turns that funky green blue color, and that's a bad day, right? You've seen that when you've got severe drought. We had that in Northeast Iowa this year. That's a signal. The ethylene gas is a signal to the plant to shut down. This is the end of life cycle here. So the strobies they block that ethylene. I'm going to mess around with a product called BW Respite. Mike Preby, who's a DSM out in north central Iowa, in a previous life, he worked with this stuff. He has some pretty good biological experience, and he's been giving me some direction here on some things to try. But you know, this is like $2-3 an acre. So if I can put this on when I don't have an infection, a fungal growth out there, and do the same thing, still relieve that stress, you know, at that tasseling time frame, this could be a real good possibility. Okay, we'll have to still scout, you know, later in the year, make sure we don't get anything moving in at tar spot time frame. But I'm going to do a little bit of work with that one. Okay, you guys have seen Sean Conley's work here, Cool Bean Advisor. He did do a biological study this last year, and interestingly, we've sold Graphex for several years. We think it's a very good product. It's got a combination of biologicals in there that stimulate root growth, right? And we get that root growth, we go get those nutrients a lot better. So in his study, it was really the only one that showed a yield difference very consistently in his study. So I did want to kind of add that up there. But you can see, I mean, I don't know what half of those things are, okay? It's a really, really busy field. Okay. This slide represents our pause for profit, okay? And we started this last year. This is what we talk about in the springtime, all right? And it may be pause, you start that field, you get out of the tractor, you dig, you make sure your depth is right, you know, or it could be your planter's all charged up, you're ready to go, soil conditions are good, but what's my temperature like? Okay, and that's what we're representing here with the thermometers that we have as giveaway, okay? get out there and check that soil depth. Drew, what happens when the field conditions are ready and I can't plant? I get a little anxious, okay? So this is really, really important, okay? Everything has to be correct. Drew, sometimes maybe we're harvesting or something, and Drew's like, okay, combine's got this wrong with it. If you give me 15 minutes, I can fix it, and otherwise we can fix it tomorrow morning, because he knows that it does drive me crazy not to be running when you need to be running. But I usually let him fix it anymore. So this is really important, though. You should have seen this slide before. This is work that's done with Iowa State, but I want to revisit it. It's really important. It fits into this pause for profit, okay? This is last year. This is real world data. This is what the curve, this planting curve is going to be the same no matter where you're at. So whether it's Wisconsin that does the work, Illinois, or like here with Iowa State. You got a time frame there on the front of this yield curve with corn that can be a real problem, right? The planting curve on soybeans is pretty flat up here. We don't have this big yield hit by planting our soybeans too early. You know, and I've been a big proponent of early planting soybeans, but if we lose some population with soybeans, who cares? You know, we can do 100% yield potential with somewhere between 80 and 150,000 plants out there. You know, it can be different by year as to what we really need for that full potential. But beans will really make that up. And in a corn plant, and you know, the precision program show that, you know, the 24, 48 hours, that emergence that's behind, and how detrimental that was. I will argue, and you guys have seen me show a lot of information, it's not necessarily that plant was in dry soil or a different depth or whatever. Why did it come up 24 hours or 48 hours later? A lot of times it's got imbibitional chilling, it's got cold injury, it's got a soil-borne fungal disease. There's a reason why it emerged late in a lot of cases. With a corn plant, if it gets dinged by those three things early on, it's never going to be the same plant, all right? It may be a 50% yield contributor. It may not put on any. Not so with soybeans. We can frost soybeans off. The axillary buds activate at the cotyledons. The plant's almost 100% yield. Okay, two different crops that we're dealing with. So with corn, we really have to watch this. Now, this is what we saw last year. We tried to do a real careful job of getting away from the imbibitional chilling. So we recommended planters shut down in that early April planting time frame, and I think we did a pretty good job of it. And I didn't see much for imbibitional chilling. But because our weather forecasts are so accurate in this day and age, we had cold weather set in that was not predicted. We thought we'd get by the imbibitional chilling, we're good to go. Well, it got cold on us, okay? So we had a lot of this leafing out under the ground that's just cold injury in that corn. And we lost stand because of it. So at the risk of getting Drew in trouble, because this field is on Drew's landlord lady over there, and she probably hasn't seen this, but we planted a few fields after we got done with soybeans early on, like 13th, 14th, 15th of April. And those pictures, a lot of those pictures I just showed you are from those fields. So we had, you know, same soil type, same hybrid. These are the comparisons planted on the 4th of May, which is when we got back in, okay, after that cold weather, and the 14th of May is when we did our initial planting here. We lost 21 bushel to the acre. Now, I'm not blaming Drew, because Drew was planting on the recommendation of his local agronomist. And we didn't plant a lot of fields. We didn't want a lot of eggs in that basket, okay, because we knew there was some risk. But that's real world, what can happen if you get too early with corn. I thought the early planted stuff was going to out yield the later stuff. I mean, it came up, the roots rooted down good. It took that early drought better. I thought, man, this stuff's going to roll. You can't make up population in corn. You can in soybeans. The soybean plant will do it itself. You can't do that in corn. You got to get off to a good start. Different hybrid, different fields, same soil type, same thing. So a couple of fields where I did that comparison. This will alter my decisions in the future, in the same situation. All right. Early planted soybeans, related to that, I've shown this slide already, but the farmer here in blue planted on April the 10th. I'm a big believer in early planted soybeans. Get to the V3 stage by that magical time frame in June when the night length is correct, and you're going to flower on the front side of the summer solstice instead of the back. It's going to give us an additional 2 weeks in the R2 stage, which is flowering up and down the plant, and on average an additional 2 pod producing nodes. There's nothing magical about it. That's what gets us that yield in this program. And I always say there's one thing, but then people have told me that there's actually 2. What's my favorite part about early planting soybeans, if you've heard me talk about it? What's that? Yeah, and what I was looking for the first time I asked this was it's free. Doesn't cost you anything. I'm thinking that's a big thing, but as you guys remind me, my favorite thing is it keeps me out of the corn planter when I shouldn't be in it. Right, Drew? Yeah. So it's a great program. Now, the neighbor here, this farmer is custom farming those fields there. I'll tell you that the yield history is pretty similar, okay? Now, it's Cornelius here versus not Cornelius. I expect to get more like 3 to 5 bushel, not 5 to 10 or 5 to 10 to 15 like we did here. The only major difference here is the early planting, okay? It's a wonderful program. Okay, I'm going to show a few slides here from the University of Illinois Research Farm at Monmouth, which is right across the road from where I was born and raised. Now, I'm showing them because I don't see these published. Okay, I'm on the steering committee there, so they send me this information, just different trials that they do through the years. So this one has been very interesting to me for about 3 years now. I'm moving about 6 fields. Drew and I are moving about 6 fields into this rotation. But we have always known a couple of years of corn, the soybean yields are going to jump up, right? We were in this 50-50 rotation forever, for decades. And then we started working on that rotation where we do a couple years of corn and our bean yields increase. Well, we're breaking a cycle of some sort, whether it's soybean cyst nematode or disease or whatever it is. But I don't even know why this study started, but they started doing 2 years of soybeans and then follow it with corn. Just the same thing we were doing with a corn bean. Now they're doing bean corn. And they're getting this kind of a yield bump here. So this is 2022 here, 18 bushel. And you'll see here they've got 5 years worth of continuous soybeans. I'm not recommending that system, okay, but they have this in the mix. And then here, this is the first year soybeans in this mix, and this is year 2 in this mix. So we're just a bushel off on that second year of soybeans, which if we're doing this rotation, we're going to have that. Needs to be pretty close. That's margin of error there. So we're not losing yield on that second year. 2023 results, same thing. We're still getting a big yield bump. Okay. This is corn yield following 2 years of soybeans, and this is your corn soybean rotation. So we're getting a 10 bushel yield bump in this rotation. Plus we're getting a yield bump with the soybeans following 2 years of corn if we're doing that rotation. And here, I mean, we're actually even higher yielding in year 2 here, but still within margin of error. Again, I don't know why this continues to happen, but I'm not recommending that rotation. But beans following beans is not something to fear, all right? And the other thing about this one is we had extended diapause, the most I've ever seen across the state of Iowa last year, right? This rotation, 2 years of corn, 2 years of soybeans, will defeat extended diapause. Those eggs they're staying in the soil, not hatching that first year of corn, and then they're going to hatch out the next year, okay? So if you got 2 years of soybeans, they're going to hatch out in year 2 of soybeans, the extended diapause eggs of the northern corn rootworm beetle. So that's another thing I think could be beneficial. I'm just throwing this out there. I think it's something that we need to look at. Again, I'm going to do some whole field situations with it. How am I doing on time? Okay, all right, I can do it. Maybe. I don't even know where I'm at exactly. Okay, I'm not really looking at rotation here. After last year, we had some real train wrecks following rye in particular, but cover crops in general. And I'm not downplaying cover crops. They definitely have their place. But I am pointing this out. This is kind of what we saw. So here we got corn yield following, corn yield in the regular situation, no-till and conventional, but following that rye, it just dried the ground out so much. Okay, so we really need to be aware that that could be an issue. Maybe we terminated a little bit quicker than we normally do. But same thing happened here with soybeans, not quite as great for sure. Normally, I wouldn't expect there to be much of a yield drop here at all. I'm pretty in favor of this. I've never been in favor of corn following rye. I just haven't. Okay, this is my last slide. So we've been kind of teased here lately with a new seed treatment. Okay, and this is from Syngenta Seed Care, which they are the company that most of our products come from. And they are probably really the only player that's really has a robust research program currently for soil-borne or soil seed treatments. So this would come right on the seed. The product's called Timerium. It's not for sale yet, but I don't follow Syngenta lawyers, so it doesn't really matter what I say, I guess. Probably going to be available in 26 full scale, maybe in a little bit in 25 on soybeans, and then 27 on corn. But the reason that I'm excited about this is, the main thing that they were going after with this is nematodes. Okay, this has excellent activity on soybean cyst nematodes. Are soybean cyst nematodes an issue for us? They are. Okay, soybean cyst nematodes are a huge issue for us. We farm in good enough soils that we don't see the visual symptoms above ground a lot of times with SCN, but it's there. And our trait, our control methods that are bred into the plant, the PI-88788, is really rapidly not working. Okay, we've got a few more P-Kings on the market that work better, but this is really going to be a great thing in the soybean realm for the control of SCN. But it also has some activity on some diseases, okay, which is a really interesting thing with a nematicide. They went after it with a nematicide as a nematicide. Of course, they always test it for everything else, but on the soybean side of things, it's showing some control on white mold. Not a season-long thing, but if we can get early season white mold, get a little bit of control there, and then spray a fungicide a little bit later, closer to that fungicide window that brings us yield because of stress reduction, that could be a big thing in the soybean market. It will likely replace the Saltro in our mix because it does control sudden death. Okay? Every bit as good as Saltro, it looks like on the studies that we've looked at. So we just bring that into the mix. We're still getting the SDS control and we're getting SCN control. That's huge. I'm probably as excited about it in the corn market because it does control any nematodes that we know of in the corn. And again, we're probably not seeing that damage, and it's probably there. Our soils are good enough that we've got damage from nematodes and we're not seeing it. Last couple of years, I've been testing some nematicides, and I kind of do it as almost as a favor for the suppliers. They're always wanting us to test these things, so we try to be a good partner and do that. I'm seeing yield increases from nematicides that I didn't expect. Okay, so that's telling me that we have yield reduction in our corn with nematicides. But the big thing that I'm excited about it on the corn is the fusarium control. This is going to be a game changer, a step change in fusarium control. We had terrible fusarium damage last year, particularly in north central Iowa. We lost 10 to 15,000 plants per acre where it was at its worst. All right, and fusarium, it's widely believed that fusarium is the causal agent early in the season that gives us crown rot later in the season. So those plants that ghost and die early, everything else is green, you got that dead plant out there, that's crown rot. that set in early in the spring with Fusarium. It's actually actively controlling them. So it works on the SDHI area in the nematode, which, if you think about it, the newer, really long-lasting fungicides are SDHI fungicides. Okay, so it does have, by itself, has activity on these diseases. So, and that's a game changer. We did Miantis a couple years ago for Pythium control. And, you know, that's our #1 soil applied fungal disease, in my opinion, in our area. Fusarium is #2, and it's really close behind. So to have this kind of, you know, activity on Fusarium is exciting. You know, it's not going to be something we'll roll into the cost. There's going to be more of a cost for this. I think in the work I've done last couple years, it's worth it, you know, to get those nematodes controlled as well. So, but it will be an offering that we'll have, and we're very excited about. I believe that is it. Are there any questions? I'm out of time. Okay. Thank you. Got a question? Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. So you'd have to be real careful. The question was, what about the white mold coming into second-year soybeans? You know, #1 on the disease triangle, if you don't have the environment, it may not be a problem. But if you know that pest is there, this may not be the rotation for you, okay? We used to worry about brown stem rot, beans on beans, in the 80s, 90s. And then we mostly got resistant beans to brown stem rot, so we didn't worry about that. But if you have a buildup of a pathogen like white mold, that might be a situation where the corn or a bean rotation is not a good idea. Unless you're pretty comfortable, we can control it with other things. So, and you know, a fungicide for white mold is probably that's probably 2 applications to really do the job you need to do. So, other questions? Okay, thank you for your time, Brian. Thanks for being nice to me since my mom's here. Appreciate that.